Hi folks, Dave, the Honest Audiophile. This is the OneOdio Monitor 60, and these are my Honest Audiophile impressions. I want to thank OneOdio for providing the Monitor 60 for review. Do greatly appreciate it. OneOdio, you rock. Alright, so the OneOdio Monitor 60, this will set you back $90 from your bank account. It is a closed back over ear headphone, has 50mm neodymium dynamic drivers, sensitivity of 110 decibels, and impedance of 38 ohms. A frequency response range of 20 Hz to 40 kHz. The OneOdio Monitor 60 comes in this black box. You get a picture of the headphone, some branding, and oh, we got a high-res sticker. It's got to sound good. So on the back side of the box, you get some specs, a little bit of branding around the sides, and then at the top, this has the power of music. You get some accessories with the OneOdio. You get a bag that says OneOdio. Okay. And then you get count them, three cables. You get this short cable that has a inline microphone and terminates into a 3.5mm. And then you get this cable. Really long and extremely janky. It never lost its curves and it's very frustrating. It twists up, tangles. It also terminates into a 3.5. It's 3 meters or 10 foot long. And then you get this cable, which is coiled partially. It does extend out to 10 feet long, and this is the cable that I used the most. So you have 3.5 or 1/4 inch. Both of these can be terminations and both of them can be inputs. And then of course you get your headphone. So the headphone for $90 is pretty well built. It is a plastic build for the majority. You have a little itty bitty bit of metal here, a little bit on the cups, and then on the slider. The rest of it is plastic. It's rather light. I don't know the exact weight of the OneOdio Monitor 60, but this thing's fairly light. And it doesn't really feel the most durable. I would be afraid to drop this. I think that it may crack and may snap over time. I'm sure it's going to last a decent while, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's put through a rough workday on a regular basis. It probably wouldn't last very long. You got a lot of padding up top, and it's kind of flexy. It does say OneOdio on top. You got sliders here that have metal. It's going to expand quite well, fit pretty much any size head. The cups swivel all the way around. When you go to lay it down flat, the headband actually is kind of angled and it'll never quite lay flat on a desk or flat surface. You're always going to have some sort of angle going on whenever it lays. The cups do kind of fold in various positions, which is a nice touch. So if you're going to store it, you can store it in various ways. But kind of does this number, kind of clacks. It's not the quietest of headphones when you move it around. On the bottom, you have two inputs. You have a 1/4 inch input and a 3.5 input. Now all three cables will connect with that 3.5 input on the right hand side. But if you're using that coil cable, that means you have to have a 1/4 inch output on your amplifier. You don't always have that. Sometimes you only have a 3.5, but you really want to use this coiled cable. So you can take your 1/4 inch and plug it into the left side, and now you can use the 3.5 termination. So that's a nice little feature, and I kind of like that. It's kind of cool. Headphones are fairly comfortable. They have enough cush on the pads They're a little bit squishy. I wish they had a little bit more density to them and weren't quite as collapsible, but they are fairly comfy, and they have just enough room to go around your ears and not be a problem. If they were any smaller, they'd be touching my ears, and that would be a frustration. By the way, if you don't know which one's left and right, it says it on the inside of the cup. Isolation of outside noises is not really that good. It's probably at best 50% of outside noises being blocked. When you put them on, you can hear things around you pretty easily. It kind of muffles it a little bit, but it's not really blocking them out. I can carry on conversation with somebody who's standing in the room with me without having to take them off. Just pause the music or turn the music down, and I can easily talk to somebody. Louder devices, vacuum cleaners and coffee grinders and cars and stuff like that, you're definitely going to hear it. So they're not the greatest at isolation, which could be a problem for a studio use, which is kind of what OneOdio is marketing these for, as a monitor or also as for DJs monitoring. And so if you kind of want some isolation in those settings. The OneOdio Monitor 60 is not the hardest headphone to drive. It does take a little bit of juice, but for the most part, a dongle will be able to drive them, or any sort of other device like a DAP or a desktop setup works just fine. I had no issues powering them with most dongles. Some of the lesser powered ones didn't drive them to potential. And then they are a little bit picky on what the source sounds like. So if you have a very neutral, analytical, cold-leaning device, the OneOdio Monitor 60 is going to turn into an ice pick. It's going to hurt. It's not going to be very pleasurable to listen to. So you're going to want a source that's a little bit more warm, and it's going to add a little bit and soften those spikes a little bit. It's going to be a little bit more pleasurable to listen to. Something that's a little overly warm may cause some issues with bloat and thicken it up a little too much. But for the most part, they're pretty easy to drive. How do the OneOdio Monitor 60s sound? So the Monitor 60 has a pretty typical V-shaped sound signature. You get big bass, you get a recessed mid, and an elevated treble. Bass of the Monitor 60 is more mid-bass focused, and it has a good amount of punch and slam, and you get some nice thump along the way. You don't get a lot of rumble and grumble from the sub bass. It kind of is rolled off there. You don't really get a lot of impact from the sub bass. Upper bass, you're not going to get a whole lot from there either. It does bleed slightly into the lower mids, just a little bit of warmth, but for the most part, this is a mid-bass focused bass, and it has a little bit of a warm tone to it, and it's a little bit thick, and it's a little bit heavy hitting. You get a lot of quantity, not so much on the quality side, but it's pretty decent for a $90 headphone. You're going to get enough bass detail and resolution here to be able to separate out instruments and be able to keep things flowing, but it's not going to be the most detailed and most analytical sounding bass available. But it is a warm and engaging type of bass that has a thump, a punch, and a slam, and it has a decent amount of authority. It could be a little bit more powerful and a little bit more fleshed out and a little bit more body to it. It is a little bit on the leaner side, but it's not a bad sounding bass. And then the mids. The mids are recessed. They are, especially in the lower mids, they are behind the bass. And the upper mids are a little bit more elevated and a little bit more forward. The mids have an okay tonality to them, and you're going to be able to differentiate between instruments and which ones are which, and vocalists and things like that. They're not the most detailed and the most resolving, but they do a pretty good job of being able to tell you what's going on within the mid-range where all the action happens. But that upper mid region is more elevated, and it can be a little bit more on the aggressive side, and also it can be a little bit on the shouty side. And just like the bass, it has a little bit more of a leaner note weight and a little bit less body. And so those upper mids region can be ice picks on some sources, and it can be a little bit aggressive and fatiguing. But for the most part, it's a pretty pleasurable mid, unless you're very sensitive to about 2K to about 6K. These could be a little bit unpleasant for you because of those upper levels. And then the treble. The treble is also a little bit elevated and has a little bit high energy to it. And the lower treble is a little bit more featured. 6K, 8K, presence region, lower treble region is a little bit forward, and it can come across a little bit aggressive. If you are sensitive in that area, these also could be not very pleasurable for you, especially on colder sources. The treble extends okay into the mid treble, and then it kind of rolls off a little bit, but there's enough energy, sparkle, and air to kind of keep things separated. Tonality wise is kind of like the mids. It's all right. It's not the most natural sounding, and also detail retrieval and resolution are okay, especially for the price tag of $90. So the Monitor 60 bass, mids, and treble are okay. This is a V-shaped sound. The mids do take a step back from everything else, and they're a little bit overshadowed by the upper mids, lower treble region, and the bass, but it's not like offensive and sounds like in a cave or anything like that. I find it to be a kind of a fun sound and an engaging sound, and the soundstage of the OneOdio Monitor 60 is actually pretty good. I was rather surprised by the soundstage of the OneOdio Monitor 60. It's, for a closeback, has decent width to it. It's not something super wide, but it doesn't sound like it's closed in or intimate. You do have enough space to kind of allow you to explore around and hear, different things and place things. Imaging wise, things move across the stage decently. It is a little 3-blobbish. Things kind of jitter across. It's not a smooth transition. They kind of go as they go across. And then the stage has decent depth to it. It's not anything super deep, but you can kind of look into the stage and go, it's right there. Oh, that's behind that. And then layering wise, other than really busy, heavy tracks or hard-hitting bass tracks, things are pretty cohesive and spaced. You can hear things in different levels and behind and beside each other. They layer okay, except for on those harder-hitting, busier tracks. They'll get a little bit muddled and jumbled and mashed together. But for the most part, it has a pretty good soundstage. Detail retrieval. For a $90 headphone, these are okay. They're not anything spectacular. You will miss details here and there, but for them, you're not going to miss the major ones. You're going to hear the most obvious stuff, but the more minor details you really won't hear. And then the resolution of those details is pretty good for a $90 headphone. Every now and then there's some harshness, a little bit of graininess, and it'll get a little bit hazy at times, but for the most part, pretty decent resolution. Tone and timbre. The tone of it is almost natural sounding. At times, those elevated mids and lower treble will throw things off, especially brass instruments, woodwinds, and strings can sound a little bit too lean and a little too stretched and sound a little bit unnatural. And then timbre is thrown off a little bit in that region as well. But for the most part, it's a pretty naturalish sounding tone and timbre. OneOdio Monitor 60, how does it compare to a couple other headphones that I have? And the one that I use as a monitor on a regular basis is the RODE NTH-100. And the RODE NTH-100 is just a better headphone. Yes, it's more expensive, coming in at around $150. It's better built, feels more stable. It's a little bit on the heavier side, but it's more comfortable with the pads. And also the NTH-100 has a more natural and accurate tone and timbre. It's better detailed and better resolving. And overall, it's just a more neutral sound and a natural sound. And if you can save up the money and expand your budget, I'd recommend the RODE NTH-100. If you really want a true monitor and an accurate mixing and mastering, monitoring headphone, and your budget is a lot more, you could go with the Austrian Audio HiX60. The HiX60, well built, and this is a very neutral sound signature. It is a little bit on the brighter side, and it's definitely more detailed and better resolving. And overall, it's just a more cohesive and balanced sound signature that is a accurate monitor. But the OneOdio Monitor 60. I wouldn't really say that this is a monitor headphone. You could use it as a monitor if your budget is only $100, but you better understand what the flaws are and what you would need to adjust in your mix, or else you'll have way too much bass and probably not enough upper mids and treble, as you would be dipping them because it's a little bit too elevated. But I don't really think of this as being a monitor headphone. It's better as an all-arounder budget headphone. It's just a fun listen. It's a V-shape, has big bass, and it has decent mids, even though they're slightly recessed, and it has that fun, sparkly, high-energy upper end. So yeah, the Monitor 60s, for a sub-$100 headphone, these aren't bad. It's been Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Speaking of next video, somewhere on the screen, subscriptions, links, and notification bells. If you haven't already, please check those off. Don't forget to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the video, and check out all the links down below. There's all kinds of information down there regarding how you can contact the channel, follow the channel, support the channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, there's all kinds of ways that you can do that through one-time gifts with PayPal and Venmo, or through monthly subscriptions with Patreon and YouTube memberships. I want to thank all my YouTube members and Patreons for all the support that they provide to the channel. It's much appreciated. Thank you very much. This channel wouldn't go forward without you. If you're interested in supporting the channel, check out those links. There's all kinds of ways that you can do it. And lastly, don't forget to enjoy the music, and that honesty is the best policy.